Welcome to this week's episode of Being Human. I am here with Sunny Bonnell. She is the co-author of the book, Rare Breed. I'm bringing it up on the screen there with all my notes. A guide to success for the defiant, dangerous, and different. And there's two words in that subtitle that drew me to the book, like different. I definitely very often identify myself as being a bit different or a bit weird. And so how could I turn that into a success? That was like the question in my head that drew me into the book. And then there's just like a ton of great stories along that theme. So Sunny, welcome to the show. Very excited to take a dive into this.
Very excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And could you, well, I must also compliment you on that wonderful hat. For those of you just listening, Sunny is wearing a magnificent hat.
Fedora.
Yes.
Fedora is what the word you're looking for.
The fedora.
Yeah.
There you go. My exposing my lack of hat vocabulary there.
Yeah, fedoras were actually a sign of, I think, sort of feminist rebellion a little bit back in the day. So it's very fitting for somebody like me.
All right. Good. So yes, we should fill the listeners in a bit. Can you give us a little bit of background, a bit of backstory?
Yeah, sure. So
before we dive into the book.
Yeah, well, so my co-founder and partner and co-author, Ashleigh and I, met in a Chicago snowball fight in our teens, grew up together, went to college together, and in our early 20s, dropped out of college together to start an agency, a branding agency called Motto, with just $250. And we had no prior business experience. Everyone told us that we would fail. And that was more than a decade ago. And we have now since led Motto to become one of the top branding agencies in the country. We have really become successful for helping, leaders and teams sort of push boundaries, break through the norm, and really activate positive change inside companies. And in 2019, we released a book called Rare Breed, A Guide to Success for the Defiant, Dangerous, and Different that we co-authored together. And it was really, we started sort of with a curious question based on our own sort of journey, of tearing up the rule book and starting from nothing and having people fill us with doubt and uncertainty that we were not good enough or we were too much of something in order to succeed. And so the thesis of the book really is, what if you could take the parts of yourself that other people criticize, traits they call defiant, dangerous, and different? And what if we could turn those same traits, those same so-called vices into our virtues, into traits that we could leverage for success, traits that we could use to open doors, and traits to eventually live into our full potential. And so that really became the kind of the crux of the book's content. And in that book, we talk about 7 traits, which are rebellious, audacious, obsessed, weird, hot-blooded, hypnotic, and emotional. These 7 traits are mostly seen both from a young age as, counterintuitive to your success. You should make them invisible for the most part if you want to succeed in order to climb that ladder and continue moving forward through your career. And we believe, and have certainly proved it with our own career, that not only should you lean into that, but that you should own all of who you are, not just the pretty parts.
Right. Yeah, that comes through again. Own it all.
Own it all.
Yeah. And as I was reading it, I there was definitely, it sort of felt a bit uncomfortable reading it because there's definitely parts of myself that I'm not fully owning yet. And
right.
Yeah.
Which is the case for most people. Think about it. I mean, we're all born with certain traits, right? They emerge at different points in our lives. And sometimes those traits are, for lack of a better word, they're silenced. They're silenced or awakened at different points within our life. And this happens through, conditioning. This is from our parents and teachers and friends and people who, essentially want the best for us, don't want us to get hurt. So they sort of try to mash out those traits. They don't want you to be rebellious. They don't want you to be audacious. They don't want you to be emotional, right? We're always taught to kind of quiet those inner traits. And I think what we've learned and what we've seen again and again is that if you can awaken them and sort of not and hear your own voice, I think what it allows you to do is chart your own path and find a way forward that truly feels that it's your own, whereas I think even from a young age, our parents are notorious for this, of kind of envisioning a life for us that we haven't lived yet. And Rare Breed really aims to awaken the parts of people that haven't heard themselves in a long time. Perhaps they're in a job that they're not connected to, or they're in a life they're not connected to. And, they've been conditioned into this. And if Rare Breed has done anything, I think in the market recently, is that it's made people who have been made invisible feel visible again. And also the work that we now do with teams and organizations and leaders is that we are finding that we can educate them on not only how to look for the rare breed to innovate and be within your organization, but also how to retain them, how to keep them, because that's what you want. Rare breeds are so important to moving the world forward. And yet we societally try to push them out most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're so right about that. And there is the untapped, they're the source. There's so much the source of creativity and innovation in society, right? It's the weirdness and those rare ideas in all of us that move us forward.
Exactly.
From your perspective then, so what are, if you don't mind sharing, like what are some of those aspects of yourself that you've had to identify, learn to develop and use out there, like, for you?
Yeah. I mean, as a young kid, I was definitely quite the wild card. My family, I'm the youngest of three. So I was, they called me the flu because there's actually a huge gap between my brother and my sister and me. So, they weren't expecting me. Let's put it that way. And I think they weren't expecting me to be so rogue, at a young age, but I was a bit of a wild card. And I think I had sort of entrepreneurial tendencies at a very young age. So when I was in third grade, for example, I would take this, my mom would make these incredible lunches and, in brown paper bags, and she would send me to school and I would trade them because they were so good. I would trade them because, we grew up, I didn't have a lot of money. And so I wanted to break dance. And so I would trade my lunches and swap shoes with people that had Nikes so I could break dance after school and then give them back. And, that was happening in like third, fourth grade. And I think my family was just like, I don't know what we're going to do with this one. Right. But that kind of audacity, right, was really inherent very early on. I don't think we had the words for it, but I was definitely an audacious child. I was always reaching beyond my grasp. I was always sort of visionary on a lot of levels. And it was no surprise that I would drop out of pre-vet school to start a agency with no background experience in running a company at all. We were in our early 20s. There was no blueprint. There was no founder or anyone we could look up to essentially that could tell us how to run a branding agency, let alone what it meant to be a branding agency. So the fact that we did that was audacious in and of itself. And when I took the Rare Breed quiz, which I'm sure you'll mention this in the notes, but we developed a quiz with a professor and psychologist where you answer 28 questions and it tells you what that dominant rare breed virtue is. So every time I take it, I get audacious. And I think it really stems from that entrepreneurial background. Both my grandfathers were entrepreneurs. One of them couldn't read or write. He was a coal miner. He would leave with a car and come home with a pistol. And, he knew the art of negotiating. And, they both started their companies with nothing but guts and vision. My dad, the same way. He started his company, I think, with less money than I did, and no college degrees, nothing like that. And, he just wrestled vision and hardship forward, so that he could create something that mattered. And I only think you do that when you sort of have that audacious backbone. There's no, and I certainly have that. I think it runs in me probably pretty deep from a real young age.
Yeah. And so talk me to vet school to starting a branding agency. Like
my dream was always to be a veterinarian ever since I was really, really young.
You're fed up staring at cows' asses. It was like,
Yeah, I mean, I
need to make logos.
I know, it was so strange. No, I was. So I'm a musician as well, and I, was actually moonlighting as a graphic designer while I was in pre-vet. So I was trying to study to be a veterinarian, and then at the same time, a musician. So I would sort of dabble in the side a little bit of making, band posters and CD art and things like that. Again, this is like, early 2000s. So I'm, making this kind of work, and I found that I was just so passionate. I'd stay up all night, get very little sleep, and I would do this all night long, just trying to kind of fill this thing that I was feeling, and no idea that I turn it into a career, but certainly that's what happened.
Right. And then you just, yeah, I mean, that's the audacity, because a lot of people might have that passion, and they might feel it in their bones at some level, but the voice may overpower them saying, right, yeah, but you can't just run, vet schools, and I'm channeling my own parents and, my own self-talk here, which might be something along those. Yes, but you're going to get a safe salary, and you're going to get a good job with that. And what the hell are you doing thinking you can sort of jump off that train?
Right.
But you obviously were able to say no to that voice, or perhaps it wasn't really there for you. I don't know. Yeah,
I think it was, that voice was there for me, but I also, you'd mentioned that those voices and our parents saying that, there's a lot of conditioning, as I mentioned earlier, that happens where we stay on the straight and narrow because we don't know that there is other options for us, and I think then I was just, we were willing to take the risk. And I don't know that we knew what we were getting into, certainly didn't know at the time, but, and certainly didn't know that we'd be met with such opposition. We were in a really small town that had been sort of dominated by only a handful of advertising agencies. There was no one calling themselves branding agencies back then. And the fact that we sort of came out swinging in that way, I don't think we knew it at the time, but we certainly were a threat. And, we could have never imagined that two young girls could be, at the time we were, young girls, women, that we would be a threat in that way, or any kind of, considered in that way. And I think that there was a time where, we were probably a couple of years into business where we began to have that doubt. There was a lot of doubt. And how we even came up with the book idea was we had a conversation with my dad, also entrepreneurial, as I said, who sat us down and said, we were like, we don't think we can do this, right? We're broke. We don't have any clients. No one knows who we are. Everybody thinks that we shouldn't be doing this. We have no background in this. Like, what are we doing? And he said, well, you two are a rare breed. Not everybody's going to get you. And you have to succeed because of who you are, not despite who you are. So really lean into that, because that is the thing that will make you too successful, is by owning all of those pieces, the rebellious nature, the audacity that we love so much. Those are your selling points. Those are your superpowers, and you should really lean into that. And what's really interesting about that story is that we filed that away in 2007 and didn't speak of it again until 2018 when we began writing the book, because we were like, what is it about, having now worked with in our role, both Ashleigh and I's role as leadership and brand consultants, where we go into companies and organizations of all shapes and sizes. We've been in the biggest brands in the world, Google, Hershey's, Microsoft. And we have seen it all. We've seen the good, bad, and the surprising of these leaders. And what it taught us was that all of the most incredible thinkers, the most audacious visionaries, the most obstinate individuals were the ones that were doing the most incredible work. And they were often temperamental and defiant and dangerous and a little bit odd. And, when we started to put all that together, we kind of connected it back to our own story, and then began working with leaders on those exact same traits, and then sort of made the connection to say, we should write a book about this. Because what's interesting about the phrase rare breed is that it means unordinary among the kind. So you are one of a kind. We're all one of a kind. And what's really interesting about that phrase specifically is, if you look back historically of the way we define people who are different, we always say it in a way that makes them feel that they are still an outlier. You're using words that say you're on the outside looking in. You're a misfit, right? You're the ugly piece of fruit. You're the outlier. You're on the out looking in. You're the black sheep. You're the square peg in the round hole, right? And we were like, what if we could, come up with something that was really a sort of a badge of honor, that it would flip that meaning on its head. And I think Rare Breed does that. It's a phrase that, we've got teams and cultures now calling themselves Rare Breed cultures, Rare Breed teams. And you shift from this thing of like, oh, diversity is a checkbox of like skin color to now looking for diversity of thought. You want those rare breeds on your team. You want rare breed thinkers because they are the key to your success. The problem societally is we don't know what to do with them. We're intrigued by them, but we don't actually know how to get them and retain them. So much of our work around the book was really about the individual, right? The change maker who identified as a rare breed and saw themselves as a rare breed. But now what the book has turned into, which has been so exciting, is that the book is now turned into a tool that change maker can go to their companies and say, look, you guys are a bunch of, ordinary red tape thinkers. Like, we should bring this thinking in. And not only should we be looking for these people, but we should really be trying to celebrate them. And that's the work that we're doing now, which is, we've moved away kind of from doing a tremendous amount of branding to now working one-to-one with leaders and teams to help them think like rare breeds.
Well, it's almost like you're going the next level down, because where do those great ideas for branding come from, right? Well, they come from somewhere, and you're helping, I guess, companies tapping into. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're absolutely. You're right. I never thought about it like that, but that's an interesting way of thinking about it. It's sort of one level down, where it's sort of like, now we're sort of coming into the company and saying, well, in order for this, brand, in order for it to thrive and continue innovating and to stay relevant, is that you need these sort of, these traits within your company in order to do that. So what's really fun is when we go into a company and we have the leadership team take the quiz and we find out exactly what rare breeds are on there in the team, and how they can actually work better together, because it gives you another level of understanding. When for example, that I'm rebellious or you're emotional, it allows us to communicate in a very different way, because now we begin to understand how we see the world, how we feel in the world. And that's a really interesting point, a lens to look through, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Is it possible to go through that questionnaire and then you're not rare in any way? Can people feel a bit deflated?
Yeah, I think. Well, no, you definitely have a trait. We all have a trait that's pretty dominant. The difference between rare breeds and everyone else is that rare breeds have really tapped into that, right? So they know the difference. They know when they're sort of leveraging it and utilizing it. They know when it's at work within them. A lot of people don't. The vast majority of people on the planet don't know that. And the reason that we wrote this, and the reason that we developed the quiz and the training and the workshops and everything that we're doing at the leadership level, is because we want to change that stigma. We want to help more people really understand that they are in fact unique, right? Like, there's no carbon copies of any one of us. So just by the very nature of you being here, you're rare. But we've codified it in such a way that it allows you to begin to dial that in a little bit more and figure out where is that trait at work. If you move through the world rebellious, and when you take the quiz, I think a lot of people have aha moments where they're like, all right, like this makes sense to me, and a lot of people do identify with the other 6, but there's always one that's really sort of dominant. It's primary. It's always at work. And when you take the quiz and you kind of understand what that trait is, or you read the book, for example, not only do you understand what trait you are, but you also understand, and we go into great detail in the book, what's really kind of, I think, clever about the book is that we go into the light and dark sides of it. Meaning the very question that you ask yourself is, what wolf do you feed, right? The good one or the evil one? And the reason that they're traits and they're vices is because they are in fact dark. They're as powerful as they are perilous. And it's important to know which one of those is at work, because when you are sort of when you don't know what dominant virtue is at work within you, it's very easy to let that go rogue. And then you don't really have any direction and you don't know how it's playing out for you. It could just be very destructive and you could just be considered a troublemaker, or, you're cast out of organizations that you work for. When you start to tap into the good part of that trait, what you find is that your career opens up, your life opens up, and you become a little bit more efficient at harnessing the true spirit of what you're doing and the gifts that you have to offer. And how that then gets realized, why it's so important that organizations also understand this at the organizational level, is because most of them don't actually know how to manage or leverage rare breeds within the organization, because they've kind of, they're in the dark side of the trait, right? They're a little bit, they make people uneasy. So instead of making them uneasy, the goal is to actually make them work for you in a much, much more powerful way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I contrast it with my experience. I mean, it's been a bit of a while since I've been a corporate employee. But when I was in those machines, let's say, you'd have these role descriptions, right? Like a manager or senior manager or whatever the firm you is, you tend to have this, right? And then there'd be these broad categories of like capabilities you need to have at that level. And all of the conversations you had about your growth was like, how do you start to, exhibit behaviors at that next level up? And like, how can you meet the expectations or exceed the expectations of your current role description in order to get there? And it was all so sort of boxed off. There was just no space for this kind of conversation, which would be like, okay, Richard, let's look at what makes you different and weird and dangerous. Mm-hmm. And let's think about how we can harness that in a good way, because that's going to bring you into a more passionate place in your life. And it's going to help us and everybody around you to grow at the same time. Like, that was just nowhere to be found, like that conversation. Unheard of. There you are.
Yeah. And I think that that's our entire mission, right? Is to change that conversation. We want to be able to educate teams and leaders on how important it is to not only hire for this type of person, but also, again, as I said, to retain them, use them to innovate, really, push them to be their best and not be afraid that it might not be what you expected.
Yeah. No, that's a big part of it, isn't it? It's just at the leadership level, it's like stepping into that uncertainty. What's going to happen if I release these beasts, right? Like that, there's something like that going on in people's heads.
You let the lunatics across the asylum. I mean, look, like leaders they're supposed to be and possess traditional, conventional leadership traits, right? We're steady, we're decisive, we're consistent, we're calculated, we're diplomatic, we're logical. We know that these qualities are important, but rare breeds, they think, act, and communicate with an entirely different frequency, an entirely different mindset. And that mindset can not only be applied to you as an individual, but that mindset can also be applied to your entire organization. Most companies are afraid. Once they've reached a certain pinnacle in their business, they're too large to turn back. They've lacked the ability to be nimble, to be agile, to really use that mindset as a competitive sharp knife, right? And what the rare breed mindset is doing is it's tearing conventional thinking apart. It's eating the status quo for breakfast, and rare breeds, they already, they're already on the payroll. You have them on the payroll right now. You just don't know it. Or you do, and you fired them, or they've left. That's the key. They've either went and completely redefined an industry or a category, and you missed out. You're looking for the neurotic obsession with minute detail, the angry intolerance for injustice, the absurd sense of whimsy, the rebel sort of gleeful attempt for what doesn't work. These are all qualities that actually transform businesses. In our book and in our workshop, we teach that you see them, you feed them, and then you get the fuck out of their way.
Yeah, but that is terrifying to some executives, isn't it?
Well, yeah. But listen, the Harvard Business Review published a study that said fewer than 10% of people work in companies that encourage nonconformity. That is staggering. So what you're basically saying is that leave your real self at the door. And in doing so, how many great minds, how much innovation are we losing out on because we punish those for even trying?
Yeah, no, that's so true. And you used an interesting word there. You said this is part of big organizations becoming agile, right? And that's a big theme on this show. And we've had lots of people from in the software community, talking about agility. And often the focus is on like, what are the processes? What are the customs, that we need to adopt as like a tech savvy or a tech oriented business in order to, develop software efficiently and be able to change and mold our software as we respond to the market. But what's interesting is the very first tenet of the Agile Manifesto is individuals and interactions over processes and tools. And what you're talking about there is like, embrace these individuals, right? That's at the heart of agility. Like, embrace them for all that they are, and build out from there. Like this sort of obsession with the processes has got to be secondary.
Yeah, because at times, like what you do is you end up by putting so many sort of cages around us, we end up suppressing the very talent that we had hoped to invoke. And all these organizations, we work with them all the time. They want the creative ninja, they want the goal crushing account reps, the tech demigods, but during the interview, like, what do we do? What do most employers do? Well, they tell these rare breeds who they want them to be. Here's our rules, follow them. Here's our culture, pour yourself into it. And what we're not understanding, I think, is that people are the culture. And by encouraging these individuals to be who they are, flaws and all, respecting and rewarding that individuality, word gets out, and soon you're able to retain and attract the kind of talent that you want. And then you're building something that everyone wants to be a part of. It's just incredibly difficult to do because we are wired to create conditions that are not, that they don't have questions. You don't want question marks. Most people don't like question marks. They don't like to be uncertain, and uncertainty breeds, negativity, and ultimately it breeds conformity. So, the next thing you know, you're creating a culture. You think you're creating a culture of, do you fit here? But what you ultimately are doing is you're pushing out diversity of thought. Yeah. And what you need is that diversity of thought in order to continue changing how the world works.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. And that why do we cling to conformity? And there's something that so many of us find solace in, right? And comfort in. And Gary Hamel's got a great new book called, he's a management thinker, called Humanocracy. And he has this concept of the recovering bureaucrat, right? And as if somehow we're addicted to conformity, addicted to the process, addicted to the routine. And then we get caught in all these games in order to sort of manage our status within the bureaucracy. And like the first step is to accept we're part of that. We've been complicit in creating this bureaucracy. We've been part of that game. And then we can start to distance ourselves from it. I mean, so I guess the question is, do people need to go through some kind of almost deconditioning before they can fully embrace your message?
Well, that's a good question. I think that there is a bit of trauma that happens with people that have been in organizations that have they've kept their head down and kept their jobs, and they've not been allowed to fully realize themselves. Yeah. But I think that happens in life in general, right? So I think what you have to realize is that it's happening. The world is set up to conform you. And what this is doing is just educating that there are additional ways of looking at this problem. And what you want for somebody like that is to, I'll give you a great example. I had somebody reach out to me. We get a lot of letters from people that have read the book and have made some pretty crazy life-changing decisions after reading it, and I'm like, oh no, it's a good thing. But, you just see people doing some really radical things, having sort of tapped into this, and really it's like it clicked. And I got a letter from someone who had said, or an email essentially, that had said that they had been fired from every job that they had ever worked with or ever worked for, and that they were just really bouncing around and having a really difficult time. They had found an organization that they were a part of, but they were afraid to tell them that they were gay because for fear that they would be cast out. And I just couldn't believe it because I'm like, God, this is like 2021. I can't believe we're still having this conversation, but we are, and organizations still do. She was afraid to tell them that she was gay. She was afraid to tell her colleagues that she was gay because she worked mostly in a male-dominated industry. So, that made me think about, well, are we trying to fit ourselves into organizations because we have nowhere to go? So instead of creating more organizations, right, the question that we have to be asking is, why are organizations not more set up to create the conditions to allow rare breeds to thrive? I began asking the question, well, how do you, perhaps there's another organization for you out there that would love you for all of who you are, respect you for all of who you are, welcome that diversity. I think that mere fact that she's even having to think about that is so discouraging and tells me a lot about what's happening in the world. And I think, what we need to be doing is trying to help rare breed individuals who identify in this way, sort of leveraged it and tapped into it, to find homes, where they can, even if they're there for a short period of time, that they're able to do their very best work. And then if they have to move on, they find another place that also awakens that potential and allows them to thrive. That's the goal. I don't know that we're meant to just lock in somewhere and stay forever. We don't grow. But if you do have an organization where people are staying, the goal would be to try to continue to challenge them. And perhaps, pay attention to things that are gifts that maybe they have that you don't even know. I talked to somebody that had worked for Microsoft, and he's like, I never even sat down with my superior for lunch. It's like, I was there for a year and a half and I never had anyone sit down with me for lunch. And I thought that was extremely telling.
Yeah. I mean, I got somebody in my family who works for a big advertising firm, and they'd never, I'm not sure they ever met their boss. He ever met his boss the whole time he was there. He was there for like 2 or 3 years.
Yeah. We don't ask questions. We don't want to know. You don't want to know. That's the reality. Like, you don't want to ask those questions. I mean, not every organization, again, is like this, but the majority are. There's a few. I have been in them. Ashleigh and I have worked with some of these teams where the rare breed culture, the rare breed mindset, it is very much alive and working within this team and organization. And sometimes they are software and engineering companies where they are probably the least sort of tapped into this that you would imagine, and the fact that they're able to create these kind of conditions is unbelievable, because I've been in some incredibly toxic cultures. And I can tell you that I would never want to work there. You can pay me to work there. But I have been in a few rare companies where I have seen this really working and thriving. And it is extraordinary what the happiness that's there, the joy that is there around the workplace, because they're truly, truly alive, and not just alive in the sense of, they're like alive in their job and their work. Because again, you think about it, like our work becomes our identity. So if you're going to spend that much time with the people that is not your family, wouldn't you want to work somewhere where you were seen and heard and made visible and truly tapped into and awakened and excited and inspired? Absolutely. It's what we all want. Yeah.
Yeah. And I bag on about this example a lot on the show, but just because it just inspires me so much. There's a company in the UK called PropellerNet, which is another kind of design agency. And one of their practices is when they ask people, in the interview, one of the questions is, when hiring people, like, what is your dream? And it isn't like, what's your dream to achieve in the company? It's like, what's your dream in life? Right? Like, what's your dream? And then they have this practice where every month they pull a ball out of a lottery machine. And if your number comes up, the whole company tries to make your dream happen. No matter what, and like this one individual, it was to go on safari. So the company created a partnership with a safari company in Namibia and had her go and work in this safari in Namibia as part of this joint venture that had a dream come true, right? I mean, there's just a ton of examples like that. And like companies can set themselves up in this way. And sometimes when I share that story, they're like, oh, you know, that just sounds like a gimmick, because it seems so far from like what might be possible for their organization that they almost have to dismiss it. Yeah.
Yeah. I've been in organizations that do things like that, and I don't think it's gimmicky at all. I think it really it allows people to be beyond like, what is on your plate today, right? In terms of your work schedule, you're going much, much deeper into someone's hopes and dreams, and we all have them, and they are all not always tied to our job. They're bigger than that, and sometimes they are tied to our job. But the goal for us as leaders is to understand that we have to create safe spaces and cultures for people to show up. And, if we can ask those questions, how's your family? What's going on with you? If we can ask people like, what's the most important aspect of your identity and why? What do you want to tell us about yourself that's supposed to be, that could be an insult, but that you're secretly proud of, right? Those are really interesting questions that you can ask. You can ask folks that really shed light into actually who they are and who they are outside of their day-to-day job.
Yeah. But all of these more searching, these deeper questions, we can only ask them as leaders of others if we're to the degree to which we're prepared to go there ourselves. And I think that's so often the reason why people don't latch onto this is because they realize if they ask others what their dream is, they've got to be reflecting on that themselves. And if they're in a place where none of their dreams are being fulfilled, of course they're not going to go and want to ask that of other people. So I think it's so much of this starts with the individual leader and like where they're at. In fact, perhaps it all does.
Yeah, no. I mean, it absolutely starts with that. What we've really found interesting about the audience who's reading the book is a lot of times it is, I said, a change maker, who is in a company that perhaps they have felt this way or have maybe been in several jobs that they've sort of been trying to find their way. And they ultimately bring that thinking to the organization because they know at the root level, that's where it starts. It starts with leadership. And if you are not willing to be an empathetic leader or a servant leader or, to think in those ways, to adopt that sort of rare breed mindset, I think that it doesn't allow you to open the door for safety for others.
Yeah, that's right. And the safety, and we can only create safety to the degree that, we feel safe to go into those spaces ourselves, don't we? So
yeah, we are always practicing a prettier picture than what is real. I see this all the time in companies. I work with a company. We work with a company that is a tech company, and they practice open book management. And on the screen, when you walk in, you actually see like where the revenues are, and they're incredibly transparent about everything that's happening within the organization, so that you begin to, as a part of that team, you realize that your effort and what it. There's profit sharing. There's all sorts of ways that they're taking care of the team. But to open your books in that way, to be that transparent is so rare. Many companies won't even, never even think of doing something like that. So I've seen it at work, and it's really, really transformational and incredibly inspiring to see how many people like really feel part of something greater, and also don't feel like they're being cog in a wheel.
Yeah. No, that's right. And we've got lots of examples of that on this show of people who've taken that transparency, all of their board meeting notes are publicly available, not just to the company, to anybody.
Yeah. And,
right.
Small Giants is a great example of that. I know Bo Burlingham really, really well. And I think Small Giants is a fantastic concept. And also, open book management. I can't think of the name of that. I think that's the book, or open book or something like that. I can't think of it's spacing me at the moment. You might know it, but a lot of companies that we work with who are Small Giants as well as practice open book management tend to have those very similar sort of values and tend to have really amazing cultures as a result of it. And they're all, diverse and quirky and interesting and, full of vibrancy.
Yeah. Well, that's the grounding, isn't it then? Because if we can all be transparent at that level, then now maybe I could be more transparent about, those parts of myself that I tend to shut off, right? I start to feel a bit safer and I can start to express a bit more. And
absolutely.
You're kind of given permission, a bit like the way your dad gave you permission, right? To, at some level, to like own yourself, all those parts of yourself. It's
he
like
probably thought, well, if you can't beat him, join him. But I'm sure he saw a little bit of himself in me. And I think, what that was, what I think is really interesting about Rare Breed specifically is that in order to see other rare breeds, you have to see it in yourself.
Yeah.
And I think what he did in that moment was validate and witness me. He witnessed us at that point and sort of, we went from sort of making ourselves feel invisible and having other people sort of doubt and taking that chatter in as if it were our own. Having someone who sort of says, I see you, right? And I respect you and I see your potential. You need those guide people along the way. You need other rare breeds to mark you. Otherwise you kind of get lost and you may never find the path, and I think that's what's really powerful about having someone, again, I have to credit my dad for the concept of the book. We have to pay homage to him for being able to even distill that in us, that it was possible. And that we were, in fact, the very traits that everyone was telling us were obstinate and temperamental and difficult were actually the things that were probably going to help us, become successful. The fact that, we used to have this saying, we still do, sometimes we're hired for the same reasons we're fired.
Yeah. I relate to that. Yeah, I certainly
well, that's
relate
why you're doing your own thing, right? Like clearly it sounds like you were like, you had that, you're a rare breed and you started to carve your own path, because you couldn't find somewhere that probably got Richard.
Well, yeah, I think that's right. And I think I think the magic of this book is there's so many examples of people doing that. It's like, I suppose that in some ways this book can serve as your witness, right? Because as you read it, as I read it, I saw myself in some of these stories and I was like, oh, okay, and it just at some level allows me, okay, well, maybe I could take another leap into my own weirdness, right? Like, how far can I push this? Maybe I'll start wearing a fedora for my next podcast. Like,
if you do, I need to see a photo proof of this. Well, I was wearing fedoras back when they weren't cool. There was a period of, and now who knows? But no, I absolutely think it's true. I think, we tell a lot of really creative stories that you probably haven't heard before that are exemplifying this, that not only the trait in the individual as a leader, but also traits in, in the craft in which they're working. We tell a story about, Coach Kelly, who is a coach for the Pulaski Academy Bruins. And he learned through mathematical equations that he asked the question, why do we punt on the fourth down? Why do we punt the ball on the fourth down? Why do we always do that? So he just had a simple question. Why do we do that? And so we learned through mathematics that if you didn't punt the ball, you'd have a better chance of winning. So he ends up, creating this entire media frenzy. And he's just like, people are calling him out. They're like, this man's crazy, and lo and behold, he was able to win several championships. He's been able to prove the theory again and again and again. And now he's being sought out by the NFL to share some of the secrets. And all he did was ask why. It was just a simple question. We accept things as they are without ever really questioning why they are the way that they are. So when you have something that presents itself in such a way that was like, we've always done this way, and rare breeds loathe that. They never thrive when it is, why have we always done it this way? But you want people to ask that question so that we can find alternative solutions to things that we've been accepting for years and years and decades and centuries. To be totally frank, I mean, the fact that we've always punted the ball on fourth down is a curious question that no one was asking.
Yeah, no, that's true. And sometimes and it's like taking the space, right? Because that's a guy who's created space for himself to ask questions. That's the other thing that comes to mind now. And when I think about my own journey and why one of the reasons I came out of the corporate life was absolutely, it was because like maybe at some level I didn't feel like I could fit, but there was also all these parts of me that I just wanted time to explore, right? I wanted to go do some therapy. I wanted to do this and I wanted to do that. And I wanted to like do some, and it was just like, I couldn't do that and have to be in the office 9 to 5 every day. So there's also that. I think there's something about like just the space, giving people space, right, to explore, different parts of themselves, which just like the 9 to 5 organizational life, it's structurally set up. Even if you take out the culture and, the leadership and all the rest of it, just the basic structure of living in organizations, somehow suppresses that, the quirkiness in us.
Well, I think as kids, we have this sort of sense of wonder that, when we're young, we're made up of all these kind of obtuse thoughts and ideas and characters. And, we're so willing to explore and to sort of pull that box out and play. And as we get older, we become less and less adventurous. We lose our sense of wonder. And I think that, where we need to come alive is when we are on the train or in the car or, where we're just having space, as you said, to allow ourselves to dream, which we don't often give ourselves the permission to do because so much is going on that we can't possibly give ourselves enough room to even try. And I think if we can't do it at home, certainly we should be able to do some of that in the places where we spend the majority of our lives. Why can't we create the kind of play spaces or places where we can really create? I have a idea of creating like a rare breed lab where the most audacious thinkers and obsessed tinkerers and rebellious fist throwers like literally like come and descend upon this lab to create the most ridiculous ideas and see where that could go. I think that would be that would be an interesting thing, wouldn't it?
That would be great. A
bunch of rare breeds. Yeah. I mean, I don't know.
Rare Breed Island.
Maybe you can, Rare Breed Island. I love that. It's kind of like Necker Island, but Rare Breed Island. Yeah. I think where all the misfits come to play with their toys. But essentially that's kind of what I would hope to see is that, in Rare Breed is in fact going in that direction where, we've got ideas for like a conference where, the most dangerous, defiant, and different thinkers descend upon these conferences to share sort of world changing ideas. I have an idea for, like a rare breed list. I mean, I think there's so much there. And even, I was talking when we worked with Microsoft a while back, I was like, you guys need to create like a rare breed award where we really sort of reckon with somebody that's and award somebody that's done the most audacious thing, and instead of just kicking them out, like, let's like see where it goes, and they were like, that's really interesting. So who knows, Rare Breed is an entire universe of ideas, but yeah, I think there's possibility there. And I think it very well is changing, every organization that we're going into, that we're sharing some of these ideas and workshops and trainings, like it really does change them when they come out of it. So my hope would be to keep expanding that out further and further to arm more teams and leaders with the knowledge of what and how to do this, because there is question marks, I'm sure. The thing that comes to mind is, if I let the, lunatics out of the asylum, like what's going to happen? Will this complete, will it create will it fracture our culture? Will we have people who are just, the dark side of the trade, right? Like you don't want people who are abusive and abrasive, and you don't want to let that run rampant in your organization, of course. And that's not what we're talking about here, but I'm sure that goes through everybody's mind in terms of what that would mean for them if they were to have these types of individuals, sort of in more of those leadership positions. I think you would find those questions to be prominent, but I think they're absolutely, and we have developed a framework that allows us to sort of prevent that from happening while leveraging the best parts of the people that you have.
Well, that's interesting, because as you were speaking, I was immediately coming to mind is that a lot of that is about trust, right? Trusting this kind of peer interactions, we'll just naturally modulate that. But but I'm interested, like, what's the thinking you've done there in terms of?
Well, so some of it has been around the being able to reveal some of the traits within the team. It's also been establishing like what rare breed thinking is, what it's not. Being able to help organizations communicate better and more effectively using some of this lens. Another thing is we've also developed a tool called the Rare Breed Brand Wheel, which allows you to kind of, through the 7 traits, be able to see where your organization sits. So for example, if you're kind of a rebellious organization, but you don't feel like that totally is authentic, where would you might chart out in one of those traits, and how can we deploy some of that rare breed thinking across the organization to get more of where we want to go? So it's sort of, developing out new ideas, new infrastructures to allow some of this to take place. And it is, some of it's light touch, but then other things are really sort of like change management, where you're going pretty deep into the organizational structure to help them kind of pivot around these ideas. What we have found is just by asking the question, what is one sort of rare breed move or action that you have wanted to take that you have not been able to fully realize? Where has that been getting stuck, and why has it not been realized? Just by asking that very question and then helping them put into plan, sort of an action plan of how to get that done and fully realize is something that they've been wanting to do, but have felt, resourcing or, red tape, whatever, has not allowed them to do that. We also kind of shepherd them through, like, not only how to identify what that is with the team and facilitate those ideas through the team, but also be able to sort of chart out like, well, what needs to happen in order for that to fully be realized? And then what would that ultimately do for the organization? So it's really interesting where our work is leading in that regard, and those doors are opening whether we want them to or not. I think people are reading the book. Again, they're going into their company. They're like, we need this. And then we're being brought in to sort of educate and inspire. And it's the most rewarding thing I can say we've been doing, to be transparent. Like, it is the most enjoyable thing we've been able to do in our own career. We've worked in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of companies on brands and brand problems and brand positioning and brand strategy, but to go in and help them see and realize rare breed is way, way more, it's just a more fulfilling act, because you get letters from and emails from people every day and phone calls, like text messages, where they're like, that was the most inspiring thing I've ever been a part of. And, and not only have you inspired the team, but can you help us actually go and implement it? So it's cool. And then, we're also working on something. It's not released yet, but we're working on workbooks and training. So if you are in fact rebellious as a change maker, and you want to, or emotional, for example, most empaths really struggle with this. Like, you're kind of a sensitive EQ person who's you're feeling the room very differently than everyone else. We're developing out workbooks that essentially tell you how to navigate that trait to the best of your ability, and also share that with teams so that they can kind of understand like how you move through the world, what you need, and sometimes we don't even know that. We don't even know that sometimes in our very own relationships, right? With our partners, with our friends, with our parents. Sometimes we don't even know. We're like, why do we just like butt heads all the time? Well, it's because we don't communicate the same way. We're moving through the world at a different frequency altogether. So when you start to give people some language and tools to be able to work better and to communicate better, it changes how you see them. You have more empathy for them. You have more understanding of them. And I've seen it firsthand, and it's incredibly powerful. I've had people who have reached out to me who are the parent of a rare breed, and they're like, can you help me better parent my rare breed? And I'm like, well, don't have that expertise, but I can certainly give you some tools and techniques, right? Like my expertise is really in brand, culture, and leadership, but it's very true. It's how we communicate with our friends and our family and our relationships. And it also very much impacts the way we communicate at work. So it's just a powerful, powerful tool that we're finding again and again is opening up these sort of rich veins of opportunity and understanding for those who are exploring it with us.
Yeah, and I can imagine, I can really see how you find that so rewarding. Yeah. I mean, in some ways, it sort of mirrors my own experience of I started off as a programmer and now we do a lot of work on, leadership development, culture change. And we don't have the rare breed, lens which you do. But
now you do.
Now maybe we do. Maybe we'll become your proxies.
You should.
In the British Isles.
Yeah. Well, what's funny is there was no rare breed workshop. Like we, a huge organization. So, a change maker picked it up, read it on a flight from New York to LA. And by the time he had touched down, he was like, I want you guys to come in and do this with our organization. And we were like, right. Of course you do. But there is no workshop. So we had to create it and it was a huge success. So then now we're perfecting it and making it, more and more sort of, learning like where those levers need to be pulled and what people really need. And we've done several of them now, and it's very cool to kind of see it sort of developing out because it really is changing the way organizations like move. Like once they come in, they're not the same as they go out.
Yeah. No, I can imagine. And it feels like it is part of a sort of broader movement of like, let's embrace the individual in all that they are and all of their weirdness and all of that, all of it.
I think we struck at a really interesting time, with the Black Lives Matter, George Floyd, everything that's going on in the world right now. I think that we had just the book kind of struck at the right moment where these conversations are extremely important. And this book really speaks to that acceptance, to that individuality, to that uniqueness that we so desperately are fearful of. And I just think we've headed at a really good opportune time where this thinking can be, it's becoming so much more than a book, clearly. So we're just riding it. We're just rolling with it, It's pretty fun. We have a show too that we actually sit down with cultural provocateurs who have leveraged a trait, and we go really deep on in the show. We're just about to launch season 2. Our first guest was Tarana Burke from Me Too. And we go really deep on that vice and virtue at play and how that has given those individuals sort of black eyes along the way and yet kept fighting for that vision and what that really takes. And so it's a kind of a unique lens, on exploring the rare breed through audio and what it really means to be one and what it takes to be one. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, that sounds great because of all of the great change makers in history, right? It must, we're rare breed, almost by definition, right?
Oh, I mean, let's think of the first rare breed that we all know, Eve, taking that rebellious bite of the apple.
Right. Coming into the world. Yeah.
I mean, she started it all, they say. So, the first rare breed ever, Defiance. It's what moves the world forward. You have to have someone who's willing to take some of the arrows in the back. Yeah. Anyway, the other thing that's coming through is that there's a guy you may have come across called Sam Conniff, who's written the book Be More Pirate. I have heard of that book. Yeah, I don't know him at all, but I think it's a great book.
Yeah, he's also been on the show twice, in fact, with his first mate.
Yeah,
together that came up. But it's a very similar message, and this metaphor I love of imaginal cells, right? Inside a caterpillar, right? As it comes to become, before it becomes a butterfly, they have these imaginal cells, right? That they start to emerge, and they're the sort of butterfly cells, but they get attacked by the immune system of the caterpillar. But slowly over time, they get big, and they start to connect and communicate with each other until ultimately they start to form the structure of the butterfly. And that comes from Kim Pullman, who's also been on the show. But I feel like this is what's happening, right? There's like you doing what you're doing. There's Sam Conniff doing. It's like these imaginal cells are all sort of part of this movement, and we're all kind of communicating with each other through podcasts and different. And this, we're part of. That's how I feel. Right, we're part of something here that's celebrating the human at a whole new level, and we've got to be part of pushing that along.
I would hope so. I mean, it's a wonderful movement to be a part of. It's certainly wonderful to be someone delivering that sermon and having people come to church and hear it. It's again incredibly inspiring for us and incredibly rewarding. And we didn't write the book for that. We didn't write the book with the intent, oh, this is going to become a movement, or that, this will be a workshop. Like we weren't
in fact,
there.
This was the second iteration, right? The first iteration was more a design book, right?
Well, yes. Yeah. So the first iteration of Rare Breed got rejected 19 times, I think. And we had positioned it wrong. We didn't realize this, but we had written this sort of proposal, and it had, we got all these rejection letters, and we were so defeated because we were like, wow, it's such a good concept. Like, why is it, why was it rejected? And it was because we had positioned it wrong. And so we had a consultant, a guy by the name of Mark Levy, who he actually worked with Simon Sinek on Start With Why, but he's known Ashleigh and I since we were kids, like literally, like we were, I think 22 when we first met him. He's almost watched us grow up. So he helped us with the second iteration of it, and the first and the second iteration of it. And he's like, I was like, we don't want to do it. We're done. We're out. And he said, we had a Skype call with him, and he goes, what do you mean you're done? He goes, Rare Breed is fucking brilliant. He goes, get your ass back to that desk and you rewrite that proposal. You tear it down to the studs and you rewrite that proposal. He's like, you're not giving up on that idea. And we did. We tore it down, and we completely, what was really funny about it was we printed out all of the rejection letters and we taped them on the wall around us. And we rewrote looking at all of those letters of telling us that they're like, oh, Sunny and Ashleigh are great, but this book won't sell. And it's a good concept, but branding books don't sell. And, we wrote to all 19 of those doubters. That was and when you actually see the cover, right, with the big scribble, it's really like a fuck you, because it's the messy process of what you feel like as a rare breed, navigating life as one. But it was also because we were so mad that we scribbled the front of the cover as a kind of a graffiti towards the vandalizing over tradition. so there's actually story behind why that's a scribble on the front cover to begin with, which is hand done, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And so the vandalizing tradition, what do you mean? Sorry?
So rare breeds tend to sort of vandalize tradition, right? They sort of run like hooligans through the corridors of entrenched power. And, that scribble is sort of our mark of graffitiing over the norm, graffitiing over being told no, graffitiing over being told that we weren't enough. We were too white, too female, too young, too broke to succeed. And that was that scribble is kind of like a big middle finger to be totally honest.
Yeah, but I like that phrase, vandalizing tradition. Yeah. And that's kind of what companies, when we bring it all the way back to organizations, are finding themselves having to do over and over and over again. They can't rest in the same traditions. These traditions have expiry dates that are very, very short.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, that's it. Okay. Well, wonderful. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
So super fun.
It's funny. I thought we were going to get into for people, go read the book, right? If you want all the stories from the book, of which there are many, and we haven't really touched on the podcast, that go buy it because there's a ton and they're great.
Thank you.
And no, thank you. We'll put the notes at a quiz so everyone can check out
take the
themselves.
Quiz. Yeah, rarebreedquiz.com. You can check that out, and also you can go to rarebreedleaders.com, which will you can contact us there if you're interested in like a workshop or just learning about rare breed in general. We're happy to have anyone who's interested in that reach out to us and say hello.
Yeah.
And other rare breeds who identify as a rare breed. We love hearing from you.
Okay. Yeah. Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you very much. Thanks again. Thanks for writing it. Thanks for coming along.
Thanks, and Richard. Fun conversation for sure.
Great. All right.
Talk to you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.